Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, episode 132, I believe. I'm your host today, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, as always, Jessie. And Kyle, we're fired back up. It's another B.A.S.S tournament week, this time for the Bassmaster Opens. We're going to have Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma. It's a big, vast place. We got a special guest, Matt Pangrac, who will join us today to break it all down. But let's look back to last week's event, the last time we launched our boats and did a B.A.S.S tournament. It was the Bassmaster Elite Series at the Sabine River. We got to talk every day, but at the end of the day, Brock Mosley conquered his 5 second-place finishes and the stigma of being bridesmaid and finally became the bride. He was finally the hot girl on stage and got picked up for the dance. Super proud of him, and I know that that's a career-long accomplishment that he's really been eagerly waiting for.
We can certainly get into Brock Mosley and his win there for a second, but I got to stop you here. We got to stop saying getting kicked back up, because I don't think we've stopped since like March.
Yes.
Stopped having tournaments. Obviously, we all knew that looking at the schedule going into it, but of course, last week with an Open a Nation and a college event here in Alabama, so. It seems like we haven't stopped since I don't know when. I think Memorial Day weekend was the only weekend we've had no tournaments for I don't know how many weeks, but there was even a tournament that week before Memorial Day.
And they were even practicing, like the elite guys were practicing on Memorial Day. So they weren't doing a tournament, but they were getting geared up for it. So yeah, absolutely gauntlet stretch. I think the only time that we really had a break from full-fledged tournament coverage was right after the Classic, but that takes about a week of recovery anyway. So but yeah, the vibe at the Sabine River, I don't know, did they break the record? I didn't remember the number. I didn't hear a number. I'm not sure if the number was tallied by the time weigh-in was going on to announce if Sabine broke the records or not. Have you heard anything about that?
I have not. I'm actually curious myself. Obviously, the entire week there were plenty of rumblings about the record being broken. Was it going to happen? This, that, and the other. I have not heard officially yet. I know towards the end of the tournament, it was still looking like a possibility. So I'm guessing that Saturday crowd and Sunday crowd, or no, really the Sunday crowd, probably would be the determining factor. So I'm not sure, but obviously I wasn't there for the record setting tournament, but it was the most big. People I've ever seen in a way, and that's for sure. There were a ton of folks there, and that's the thing that might get a little bit misportrayed, I guess, maybe, is if you watch the final day weigh-in or Saturday's weigh-in, obviously you saw the amount of people that were sitting in the grass, but there was a huge pavilion back behind it to where you couldn't really see. On some of our podcasts that we shot during the event, you could maybe see it behind me, but there was about as many people underneath there in the shade as there was, out in the lawn. So it was an incredible tournament. Obviously, we covered it a little bit on the live reaction where Dalton and I were at Whataburger, of course. But no, it was really an incredible event to see Mosley finally get his win. I know we talked about it then, but I'm still certainly excited to hear from Brock and kind of dig into some of the details of his win, and just after he gets a little bit of time to recover and think about it and actually let it settle in, I'm sure he'll have some good reports and good things to say about it for sure.
And for complete transparency for the viewers at home, we are shooting this podcast pretty close to the end of the Sabine River, just a few days after, because obviously our guest today to preview the Open would be fishing during official practice time when this airs. So we shoot it before they start practice. So if we come out with a press release and show the attendance numbers, don't say, well, Ronnie and Kyle are sleeping under a rock and missed it. This is shot just before that. But like you said, getting to talk to Brock in a few weeks will be great. We've got a long gap between elite events, at least, where we'll still knock out some other tournaments in the middle, but we'll have, we just wrapped up a kayak event as well. We'll be able to talk to some of those winners and top performers over the season so far in the next few weeks. But we've got a big break from the first week of June to the last week of July until the next elite event. But in that time, Kyle, I believe within that time of early June to late July, I think we have 2 Bassmaster Opens that we will end up talking to. Let me see. This Open for Eufaula is the 15th through the 17th. Then we have the St. Lawrence River the week before our St. Clair event. So, we'll have 2 Opens that we will knock out there. But looking at the Bassmaster Open season, before Matt joins us, I know he's been busy already doing his own show this morning. When you look at the way the Opens have played out, I just want to go ahead and sing the praises, and we'll probably have him on at some point to maybe preview the Watts Bar event or something like that. But the points race was absolutely about as close as it could get after 2 events. Everybody in the top 10 stayed in the top 10, and they all just switched points by just a few. I think the top 3 were separated by 2 points, and it was very tight. Since Bugs Island and since the most recent one at Wheeler Lake, there's been a couple gaps formed. John Garrett, huge start to a season. He's got 755 points. And I want to say, let me look at his 4 finishes so far this year. I know he's made a couple final days, but John Garrett had a 4th, 18th, and 23rd. Absolutely phenomenal 4-event stretch to start the Opens for him. He carries a 30-point lead or so over Kenta Kimura, which we can almost just disregard Kenta other than sing his praises because he's not in the running for qualifying for the elites. He's already on there. So the first person non-elite qualified right below John Garrett would be Trey McKinney, 18-year-old, had the lead for a day at Wheeler Lake and has 722 points. He's about 33 behind John Garrett, but what a phenomenal start for John Garrett leading our Opens AOY right now.
Oh, no question. I mean, I got to go to the Wheeler event, and when you're 1 event in, 2 events in, even really 3 events in, seems like the points race is there's so much to be determined, and there's still so much to be determined. From this event on, obviously there's going to be a lot of moving, shifting, guys jumping into the top 9, guys falling out of the top 9. But you could tell at Wheeler, guys were starting to pay more attention to the points and how they were doing and what they needed. I got to cover John on day 1 of the tournament, and of course he was he was feeling the pressure a little bit. Didn't have a great practice, so he said, but ended up doing just fine there at Wheeler. You could tell there was guys that were starting to realize, like, either I got to hold on to what I got right now, or I need to really make a serious push to have a chance to be within striking distance the last couple of tournaments. So obviously the further the season progresses, the more we'll see of that. But it was exciting for me to get to see that firsthand. Some of those guys starting to really kind of feel the pressure, and we hear guys like Paul Nick all the time say, "Oh, you just can't look at the points," or "I don't look at the points." I think those guys are all looking at the points. I think that the way the EQ system is set up, I think you have no choice but to look at the points. And at the end of the day, it really is true. It's said a lot. All you can do is go out and have the best day you can each and every day, and just let the cards fall where they may. But at the same point, you kind of have to have an understanding of where you're at, what you need, what's the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, things like that. I know you get into the numbers a lot, and you have those conversations with guys a lot. So it will be certainly exciting to see. One thing I wanted to mention too is so I love and hate the Open schedule. Selfishly, I hate the Open schedule because some of the tournaments go far enough into the year where it's going to dig into college football time. So that's the selfish part of me.
Hey, I'll be live on Saturdays, so you might be out there too, but I might be tied up as well. I remember having to get a reprieve from the college bracket last year so I could go to a Hog game versus Alabama, which was great for the 3rd quarter. Other quarters, not so much.
But yeah, I mean, but the part I do love about it is if you look at the schedule, it's kind of a bit of a roller coaster in the sense that, like, you have your traditional Southern fisheries. We're going to have like a couple of, like a summertime, like pretty true summertime tournament here at Eufaula. And then, of course, we're going to have some, northern smallmouth fishery. And then we're going to go to like tough fall fishing. I mean, you're going to get everything covered in this schedule as far as, you have to earn it regardless what the schedule is. If all 9 of the tournaments were in the state of Alabama, you'd still have to earn it. But like, it seems like everything's being covered a little bit. You're going to see a little bit of everything. Your southern, early in the year spring tournaments, like I said, like a summer, grinder type tournament. Eufaula, obviously, we'll get more into that with Pangrac, but then we're going to smallmouth fishery, and then you're going to have some at the tail end of the season that are tough fall fishing. Not easy for anybody. So everything's going to be covered, and it's really going to be interesting to see these guys duke it out the last few months of the season.
And it seems like every 3 weeks we have an Open, but there will be a gap from the end of July to the middle of September or whatever it is when we have from the St. Lawrence River to Watts Bar, and then it'll go to Lake of the Ozarks, and then the Harris Chain. Now, the Harris Chain in the fall is not like other fall fishing. It has been phenomenal. Who knows how it'll go with the seasons if it was an anomaly, but there should be big ones to end the year, so you got to bring your big guns. One thing I want to look at in our points race before we have our guest on today, third place Trey McKinney has 722 points. Now, when we think about these big moves, if you gained 50 points on someone in an Elite Series event, you did your job. You did your job big time, because there's only 100 anglers, only 100 points or so to give out. They'd have to struggle, and you actually thrive. That is exactly what Kyle Welcher did in the last Elite event. Brandon Cobb struggled for the first time all season, finished in the 90s. Kyle Welcher goes up and gets a top 10, get that 70-something, 80-point flip for them. Now has Kyle Welcher in the AOY lead. Brandon Cobb's still right there with the ability to take it right back at St. Clair if he wants to. But Trey McKinney, third place, 722. In the Opens, with 225 boats out there and 175 of those anglers are EQ anglers, the ability to gain a lot of points at one time, you go do a top 10 and have the right guys get a bottom 50, you can gain 150 points on somebody really quick. It's 50 points from Trey down to 10th place Jacob Bigelow, who is our last EQ qualifier at the moment. If we were to end the season today, he would be in the elites. Him and Ben Milliken are tied at 672. So 50 points from 3rd to 10th. And then from 10th to 18th, where Bobby Lane is sitting at 622, it's another 50 points. So 100 points separates 3rd to 18th. So all those guys have still done their job and are in a great position. But I'll just say, looking at Matt Pangrac, I believe he's 200 points on the dot from the top 10. That seems like a whole bunch, and it kind of is, but with 5 events left, you could make up 200 points in 3 events. So with 5 events left, and with some of those things being grinders, which is what I think Matt likes, Matt is as good in those tougher lower weight events, we may see somebody like him jump up big time and come out of there. So Matt's sitting, what is he, 55th? I think if you're 50, I say that because he's our guest today. I don't want to count him out, but I'd say if you're within 200 points right now, you still have a viable shot. You need some good things to happen for you and some bad things to happen for others, but we've seen crazier moves and runs. You go reel off 3 top 10s in Opens, you'll make up a lot of points. It doesn't matter how bad they finish. So it'll be interesting to see who can make that jump. I think I covered it on Bassmaster Live this week. After 5 events last year, Brian Schmidt was 79th, and he was 72 points out of the Classic cut. He went on to win an event, and so that's obviously the most points you can get. But in the final 4 Elite Series events, he made up 72 points and was in the Classic cut line, and he was the farthest down after 5. I'll have to look at who the farthest was after 6 events to make it the Classic. But I think that these Opens moves over the second half of the season could really, as we get away from the spawn and we get to summer and early fall, I really think there's going to be some guys pop up out of nowhere. I'd even say a Chad Warren, who I believe is down there with Pangrac. Yeah, Chad's in 54th. You got a couple Alabama guys right around there. Zeke Gossett. Some of those guys are still in it, even if you're 200 points out. So that's my thoughts on it. And we try to get guys to preview the events in their home state. And Pangrac being an Oklahoman, he may have a lot of love-hate with Eufaula, or he might just have a lot of love, or he might just have a lot of hate. But I look forward to getting to talk to him in just a few moments when he joins us. Well, Kyle, like we mentioned, Matt Pangrac, our guest today, to preview the Eufaula, Oklahoma Bassmaster Open, the 5th stop of the season. Matt, how are you doing today, man? I know you're a busy man as well. Thanks for taking the time.
Ronnie, Kyle, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Matt, Bassmaster Opens is something that you jumped into a few years ago, and you've been kind of just, you do a division here. You did all of them. This has kind of been a growing goal, and we've seen you have a lot of success. What was your initial thought last year when we announced that you'd have to fish all 9 to make the elites? What did you, your knee-jerk reaction of, did you think it would make a better pro product? Did you think it would limit locals? And then now that we're halfway through the season, is what you initially thought true still?
Yeah, I really think it is. I was always a proponent of the 9. I liked the 3. I mean, we've had some really quality anglers come out of the 3. But there's a reason why they give the Bassmaster Angler of the Year to the body of work, why you play 82 NHL games, 160 MLB games. It's so that the cream can rise to the top. And I think especially with the schedule that Bass put together this year, which has actually been better than it looked on paper. And I thought it looked really good on paper, that the 9 guys that are going to come out at the end of this year are really going to be battle tested and ready to make an immediate impact on the Elite Series. So kind of as far as how I thought it would go. Now we obviously haven't seen it because we haven't gotten into next year yet, but and you look at the names that are at the top there, it's a real eclectic mix of grizzled veterans, new anglers, and seasoned open pros to have been there before. So I think it's a job well done so far from Bass's side with it. And the field has stayed almost halfway through the year. You've seen the field has stayed. Some guys have dropped a little bit as a whole. I mean, you still have a big core group of EQ anglers, I think, that are in it for the long haul.
Matt, let's talk about Eufaula a little bit. Obviously, like Ronnie mentioned, this is going to be Eufaula 2.0 on the schedule. I think that's been confusing to some as far as going back to Eufaula. But Eufaula is a relatively unknown lake for a lot of the bass fishing world. Obviously, one of the things I remember from Eufaula is driving from Fayetteville to Dallas. It seemed like you passed the lake about 48 times.
Yeah.
You never clear the thing because it's so big. Just kind of give us a rundown of the lake. Is it in an upswing, a downswing? That's one of those things most people might not know right now because, there's not a ton of big national tournaments on the lake.
Kyle, the cool thing about Eufaula is it has been stable, is stable, and will continue to be stable. Before I moved to Oklahoma about 20 years ago, I think the largemouth bass virus hit it a little bit, but the lake is a very healthy lake, has a very good bait fish population of threadfin shad. And as far as the tournament world is concerned in Oklahoma, I mean, it's one of the big 3, probably with Texoma and Grand being the other 2, but Texoma, Grand, and Eufaula, you have a Skeeter team trails. You have almost the Bass Nation always has events there. You have a lot of jackpots and team trails. It is kind of one of the mecca centrals in Oklahoma for tournament fishing, but we've seen this when it comes to major events. You need facilities, you need a host city that's willing to work with it, you need funding, and although there are a lot of good ramp options on Eufaula, it just has never been one of those lakes that took the professional or the open level events. Like, it wasn't high on their priority list. So I think that's the only reason we haven't seen it. I've always said, having covered this game since 2008, been to every single venue across the country that tournaments have been, and then fished this level since 19, that it's a top 3 tournament lake in my book. Now, we're not talking Falcon Lake numbers, we're not talking giant fish, but just as far as being able to fish your strength, spread out, and the number of those quality 2.5 to 3.25 pound tournament largemouth bass, and a good population of spotted bass in it too. It's a top 3 lake, and I think you're going to see really deep mid weights in this event where people are going to be like, man, it might not be a destination lake, but if you just want to go and be in the mix, it's a really good fishery.
I drove over it as well when I shot a Phoenix Pro Diaries with Luke Palmer, which has since just yielded the benefits of him winning his first. And it's just cool to see those stories. And then he wins one. Same thing for Benton winning another one. Brock Mosley this past event winning one. Seems like if you shoot a feature, if Ronnie comes to your hometown and shoots a feature, I mean, you're going to win $100,000 at some point.
It's good for me. I mean, does this count as a feature with Ronnie?
Hey, I will say this. The first 2 previews we had, Trey Swindle and Andrew Upshaw, I hate to throw them under the bus, but they got like a 120th to 150th in the 2 events they previewed. But Jack Dice and Sam George both got 4th place in the ones they previewed. Okay. So it's
batting 500.
It's one of the one you're either fishing the final day or you're glad to be leaving town, one of the 2. So, but Eufaula, I drove over it, and I think it's located on the Canadian River. But one arm of it looked really normal, dirty Oklahoma water, but then one arm looked like it was the Red River. Is there any impact? I can't remember if the red comes in there or why it is so distinctly different on one side of the lake.
Yeah, so a lot of people, if you live in, I guess, Oklahoma or west, in order to get to Alabama and go through Little Rock and Memphis, and that drive, we always call it the I-40 gauntlet, is you have to go over the I-40 bridge, which is right there. And like, if that's your opinion of Eufaula, steep rock, blood red water, super dirty. But the cool thing about Eufaula is it fishes like 4 or 5 different lakes. You mentioned Kyle, or you mentioned where you drove over it before. Down in you're probably around like the Crowder area where you keep passing it, and then you kind of pass like where the Eufaula Cove areas it's like 10 or 15, and it's a completely different looking lake there. You get up into the Porum area, it's a completely different looking part of the lake. You've got creeks and backwaters you can get into. Longtown fishes like a completely different part. So it's going to be very interesting to see how practice is spread out, because there's a lot of productive water on the lake, and I think you'll see top 10s come out of 4 or 5 different areas of the lake. Like, it should spread out. You should have guys that want to flip and fish muddy water, or flip it and fish in muddy water, guys who want to fish clear water, fish in clear water, guys who want to do the creek and river thing, doing that, guys who want to fish offshore, doing that. It's not going to be a one technique takes it all where you see 8 or 9 guys in one area doing the same thing.
See, that's what I was actually going to ask about next, because I had some friends fish. I seemed like it was a BFL regional there a few years ago. Yep. Some of my buddies from Central Arkansas went over there and loved the lake. Like, first time they'd ever fished it, and just kind of like you described, just fell in love with the place. But they had mentioned that it seemed like, that time of year, whichever time of year it was, which is pretty unhelpful because I don't remember, it seemed like a lot of guys were fishing in one general area, but you're suggesting it's possible that there'll be guys spread out, because if you look at it, it's such a big lake. You would think there would never be any crowds forming on a lake that big.
Yeah, it is. You're looking at water temps in the low 80s right now. Like I said, there is a heavy bait fish population. They also target crawfish there too, but you should see a lot of guys spread out. Now, that's not to say there's going to be guys who aren't in the same creek or in the same areas or fishing the same stretches, but especially after what we just got through at Wheeler and what we've seen at Toledo Bend, even Eufaula, for example, where I fished at Bugs Island, I thought it spread out really well. There were other guys who were up in the other arm who said that it fished really small as far as the flipping. I don't think you'll see, except for maybe a couple areas of the lake where guys are keyed on specific types of stuff. I think you could go all day and see maybe 10 or 15 boats.
Matt,
depending on the wind, that's the X factor here. Eufaula is gnarly when the wind gets up. Like, don't get your boat back, have to call someone, tournament days canceled. Like, it's a scary lake. Like, I know in Oklahoma, I know of 2 guys who have sunk boats. Both of them were on Eufaula. Like, sunk them trying to get in, like, jeez. Done, like, had to have salvage come get them out because they couldn't get back in.
Sweet. I look forward to Hank Wilton having to manage that. That's awesome. So when we get to this point of the season, whether it's the Elite Series or the Opens, it seems like you're going to fish the Tennessee River in late June, mid-July, or you're just going to go up to the smallmouth and we're going to have a break in between. But this is a different kind of lake, and I love it. It's like fishing Dardanelle or something in late June, or like a Muskogee or something like that. There are really good places in the country that can still put out good tournament weights, even in the dead of the summer or the hot and post spawn, and people don't want to be fishing there. And I feel like I get the vibe that Eufaula is a good one. I had people texting me that said that time of the year is an underrated time of the year for that place, because everyone wants to go. If we could have 9 opens in April, most people would vote for that because the fishing's good almost everywhere in April. But Eufaula, it could definitely shine in June, though. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's the perfect tournament lake. It's not going to suck, and it's not going to be a slugfest. It's going to be a good fishing tournament. You're going to see the bass track lighting up with a lot of 2 to 3 1/4 pounders. You're going to have some guys who come in and say, man, I only got 7 or 8 bites today. Some guys are going to come in and say, I got 15 bites. You're not going to see, you're not going to see everybody have limits quick. There's going to be a portion that don't. It's a thinking man's game, because you can switch gears here. You can grind it out in one thing, but you can also switch gears, switch areas of the lake. And it's not known for giant fish. Anything a 5-6 pounder is a really good fish. Now, there have been 7s, 8s, 9s caught. I know back probably 10 years ago now, I think Elam had like an 8-pound smallmouth out of Eufaula. In my opinion, that was kind of like a couple year classes of fish that they had stocked. They grew up. Those have kind of cycled through the system now. You will see some 3 to 4 pound smallmouth come in, but you're not going to see the freak show smallmouth like you saw back then. But it's a good fishing tournament lake.
So what's the weights then? What's the weights to make a check for top 40 after 2 days? And then what's the winning weight for 3 days? Do you think approximately? You haven't practiced, obviously. I preface the viewers that we are shooting this before you even start practice.
Yeah, it's going to be 100% wind and weather dependent. If you can move around and guys can get to where they want to and whatnot, that's going to change a little. And then also, if you have rapidly rising, that could help some of the guys who don't have a lot of experience on the lake if the fish push the bank. Right now it's just a hair above normal. It's fairly clear from what I've been hearing, and from just the whole region and the parts of the lake that are around that are fishing really clear too. So I would venture to say that 13 to 15 pound range a day to finish in the top 40, especially. I've been underestimating this year because of how strong the field is. And you take 230 guys. You've got guys like Justin Phillips. I think Luke Palmer's fishing it. I think John Sokop's jumping into it. You've got some guys who are just, they're guaranteed going to be in the top 40 in this thing on Eufaula, especially with the lack of information and as many times as guys have been. Top end, I think you'll see a couple 20-pound bags, but it's going to take anywhere from 16 to 18 a day to jump in the top 10. And I think if you have 18 a day, 18 to 19 a day average will probably push the win.
So this doesn't really matter because obviously the conditions are going to be whatever they're going to be.
Yeah.
But we always ask, okay, so for you personally, what would be like the ideal conditions? Like for you, like
drop shot weather, Kyle, drop shot, anything drop shot.
Yeah, no, I want it to stay normal. I want it to stay low. I mean, if you look, it's historically across the country, like it's a lot easier to compete on fisheries that you're not familiar with when the local advantage is taken out with some extreme weather. So if the fish get up in the bushes, there's a lot more guys in that are comfortable flipping the bushes. If it gets windy, it's going to constrict a lot more guys into areas that they could fish that are out of the wind. So low winds, normal is fine with me. Like I said, I fished the lake for a long time. I would by no means call myself an expert on that lake, but I'm very familiar with it. I'd put it as one of my top 3 favorites in the state. So just standard, normal, regular conditions with that, and let everyone go out and explore and find their thing and spread out is ideal for me.
Matt, I want to go ahead and jump into, we'll maybe revisit Eufaula in a second, but you obviously pay attention to the Elite Series. Brock Mosley winning at the Sabine River. We talked about it for a few minutes before we talked about the Open and bringing you on. We got to do kind of a live reaction each day. Kyle and I spent 10 minutes each way in and talked about what we saw on live, what we saw in person, and kind of the vibe of it. Brock happened to be the one angler that jumped in and interrupted the show on day 2, which he went on to win. What are your thoughts on Brock winning that event? Because it's something we talk about, the second place finishes. Some of the best anglers of all time have a bunch of seconds, but how key is it for him at this stage in his career, year 6 or 7 of his elite career, to be able to break through and do it in a place that we kind of picked him to do so?
Yeah, I didn't realize that he had 5 second place finishes. I know that he'd come close a couple times, but it was like a quiet 5 second place finishes. And then you look at that. I had Charlie Hartley on BTL, and he was talking like, man, you look at Brock, he's like a tournament fisherman with the look and the beard and the way he acts. And he's a very professional. He's a pro's pro, well-deserved, seems to be well-liked, goes about, takes care of his business, and is surprisingly versatile too. If you look at where he's finished, I mean, he's got some up north stuff going on, and now you're talking about a super stingy Sabine where he's had success before. So, especially where he comes from, out of the country, really good at a variety of different techniques, which is hard to do at this level. So big win for him, especially on a tough fishery, like one of the top 5 lowest winning weights in Elite Series history, I believe. Yeah,
he's far super. He left Bass Track and it was going to be within ounces of the lowest winning weight. He beat that by a pound, 44.3. He is safe. Yeah. Kevin Short's record's safe once again, but he's got a first.
Kevin was watching that.
He was. I did a graphic with him and I messaged it to him because I said it was Kevin Short's win on the Mississippi River, Jason Christie's Sabine win, and now it's Brock Mosley's Sabine win. But then it was also West Point was in there, Delaware River. And the one thing that was different about the Sabine, we mentioned it on Bass Live a bunch, was that you get bites. The Mississippi River event, Kevin Short, low weight, didn't get bites. You don't get bites other places. West Point, I think Skeet's Victory, that you just don't get a lot of bites. Sabine River, they were catching them. And it was kind of engaging to see that. The mornings, I mean, Saturday morning FS1, we started at takeoff. And I mean, we had 37 to 40 catches in the first hour from the guys. And most of them were within sight of each other, which was crazy, phenomenal thing. But yeah, for Brock to have a first, a second, and a 12th at his 3 Sabine Rivers, and then all of his seconds, Kyle, we talked about this. He's got 3 seconds to Jason Christie. He's had a second to Bill Lowen, and he's had a second to Kevin Van Dam. I mean, this guy, as a young guy coming up, you're either behind a guy who deserves it and has been waiting longer than you, or 2 of the best names in the game on the final day when they have a shot to win.
Yeah, that is wild. The thing I liked about the Sabine in the social media world that we live in now is all the bycatch. Like that, I would like Bassmaster needs to put a bycatch of the Sabine River between the sheep's head, the redfish, the flounder, the mudfish, the alligators eating other alligator, like just the posts of the guys, like even like Austin Felix with the ladder that's defying gravity.
Yeah. David Williams'
like,
glove that was just like there. It looked like a guy was like drowning. Oh my god!
Like you go to other fisheries and it's just the standard thing over and over. But I was actually like looking up Elite Series guys to see what kind of wild stuff they were seeing on the Sabine River and what kind of wild stuff they were catching, which is a unique, it's a unique fishery like that. Like you need 4-inch tall rough every now and then. You need glass slick greens. You need something, and like any bass angler will tell you, someone's got to win it. And if you win it, it's a great tournament. If you're not, it's like, oh, why do we keep going here? But yeah. I think you got to have that, especially going up north for the next 3, and just it's going to be an absolute slugfest.
Well, Kyle, we talked about it. I mean, everybody's in it with one swing of the bat. You're back in the game. A 4-pounder, you're 26 to top 5.
100%. I mean, you see the guys that jump from day one, from having, 5 pounds or less, and then jumping up into the cut. I mean, it happens because it's possible there. As where, you go to some venues, and of course, if you're down in 80th or worse, I mean, you basically don't have a fighter's chance to make the cut. So,
and that being said, the big fish that make a difference. I mean, you saw a fish that Cooper Galant lost that he said was a 40 places, and then Wendlett's fish that he had in the sawgrass. Like it's crazy. And we saw that a little bit on Lake with Jason Christie. That's kind of like a have and a have not, because we saw what a 9-pounder did for him in that tougher than we saw it lose in a 5 or 6-pounder did. But here, like, you're literally anybody that made that cut is a 5-pound bite away, and those fish do exist in the system. So it was kind of cool to watch those guys get seriously jacked when they loaded up. Like, oh my gosh, this fish has to come in the boat. It's so critical. Really cool to watch that on live, how any flip could change the whole tournament.
And to your credit there, like, one thing that was just crazy to me, having seen the body of water for the first time this last time, I know that there's so many factors that goes into a place like the Sabine River with the salt water, the floods, the off years, down years, whatever. It has every part of vegetation you could ever want. I mean, it's like one of the prettiest bass fishing places on earth. So, I mean, it's, I was telling my boat driver on day one, it's a little surprising that there's not a bigger population of big fish, but, there's so many predators in in that system that it's just a competition for the bait. Obviously the saltwater intrusion makes it tough. I mean, it's really surprising that it's not, I guess, better than it is. But at the same point, Ronnie and I have mentioned it so many times. It's such an interesting tournament lake because there's always so many storylines. It's not always the same thing every year. Some of the same things play, but it's never the same thing.
And the playing field's cut in half. It would be twice as big and vast in opportunities if Louisiana was in play, but obviously the trespassing private, that's a sketchy thing. But yeah, Matt, I wanted to also that was on my mind about Brock. I wanted to rewind and go back to the Opens. We talked about it before we had you on. 55th in Angler of the Year right now in the EQ Angler of the Year. I don't know if you pay attention to it. Sorry if you don't, because I just told you where you're at. But 200 point. I was saying how 50 points separated third Trey McKinney down to 10th. So the final 8 guys qualifying right now are 50 points apart. And then 10th place to 18th, where Bobby Lane is another 50 points. So if you're in the top 25, no doubt, still in it tournament to tournament. Where do you mindset wise put yourself What do you need to do? What goals do you have at Eufaula? Then take it to the St. Lawrence, and then with 3 events left, you'll reevaluate it. But what are you looking for in this mid portion of your season?
Yeah, statistically, before the year started, I wanted to average a top 50 finish. So there's X number of points divided by 9 to get to the top 50 finish. So mathematically, as long as I'm still alive, I've still got it. If a 50th place average doesn't get me in, it doesn't. But based on all the previous years, 50th place is what I had to get me in. Could all the way go down to 60th. So I've had 2 good events and 2 bad events. So those kind of average each other out. I'm averaging like a 70th place finish right now. So, I mean, I feel like I'm still very alive in the standings. You also have to factor in the fact that the Bassmaster Classic is on Grand Lake in 2024, which is a lake that I have a lot of experience on as well and enjoy fishing. So I've kind of got a 2-pronged approach here. I've got to start averaging, getting it closer to that 50th place average. But I also have no aversion to starting taking more risks because I got to put myself in position to win. Like the winning the war is making the Elite Series, winning the battle is making the Classic. And now I'm to a point where I'm winning the war and the battle by putting myself in position to win. So taking those risks, like I said, mathematically, I'm still alive. I wouldn't even call it a long shot because you've got Eufaula coming up and then the St. Lawrence River where I had a top 30 finish last time. And then you've got 2 wild cards.
Yeah.
The Watts Bar and Lake of the Ozarks back-to-back events are going to be very key. Watts Bar is going to be tough. Lake of the Ozarks, late September is no easy cookie there. So those 2 are worth just as many points as Eufaula and Toledo Bend were. So my goal is to survive each tournament with the possibility of averaging a 50th place by the end of the year by any means necessary. So when you go through the points, you have to say, well, I have to now a 70th, 80th doesn't help, but a 20th or 30th really does. So I'm playing a little bit. I'm not bunting in it, but I'm also not trying to hit a home run. If that makes sense at all. I'm still playing the numbers game.
Well, and Kyle and I talked about it. Somebody's going to reel off in these last 5 opens 3 top 10s, and that's going to, like you would have to average to get your average to 50 would be like a 25 the rest of the year, which you go get 3 single-digit finishes, and you're right there. Now a 50th and a 60th are okay to have. But Kyle, I expect fully someone in that 45 to 55 range of AOI when we do something maybe mid-August with 3 events left that's oh man, they're in the top 15 now.
Yeah, you get in a kind of a habit, it seems like, when things start to kind of stabilize out a little bit. Like, for instance, like we talked about earlier, the Elite Series Angler of the Year points. You saw how many top 10s Brandon Cobb had, and you thought, well, at least for now, that's pretty set in stone. Like, he'd have to really do something bad for that to change, and all it took was one bad tournament, and obviously he's no longer number 1. I mean, you talk about including the Classic, I want to say it was like 5 out of 6 of the tournaments he fished this year, he had a top 10. I mean, you couldn't really do much better than that. And for him to jump out of first place, I mean, you get the big picture and you look at the top 10 and then you think, well, I mean, like these guys will stay. It never works out that way. Like, there's going to be a lot of changes between now and the end of the season, because once again, like we talked about earlier, the schedule is so diverse. I mean, there's guys that, maybe, excelled in these springtime, summer, or springtime southern events, that, when you factor in a hot, tournament in Oklahoma, a smallmouth tournament up north, and then fall tournaments, which once we said, pretty much the wild card, there's going to be some giant changes, for good for some people and bad for others, I'm sure.
And here's the cool thing I like about the Open schedule is we're ending in Florida instead of starting in Florida. So You're going to see a lot of volatility go down in Florida, because out of those top 9, Florida is one of the few places that you can go target a mega sack, a freak show bag, and you can hero or zero that. So there's going to be 10 to 15 guys that go into that knowing 12 to 15 a day doesn't help me. They're going to be swinging for 25 plus a day, and a couple of them are going to connect. And then you're going to have those guys that are in that 6 to 10 that are going dude, I just got to hang on. And you've got it, but based on where it is at the Harris chain, you've got all these decisions on lakes. You have safe lakes, you have dangerous lakes, you have long runs, you have lakes that are more conducive to big fish. So you're going to basically have 3 different tournaments. You're going to have guys that are looking to maintain their position, guys that are looking to jockey their position and kind of stay there and move up, and then guys that are looking to swing. And when you end on, like we've ended on before, like on a Louisville or something like that, it's really hard to plan on that when you're just trying to catch them. But in Florida, you can actually plan it. So if you're within statistical striking distance of that top 9 going down into Florida, I think that's going to be a real fascinating tournament, because then you also have to throw nerves into it, because you're going to have a mix of guys who are trying to get back there and don't want to have to go through a whole year, guys who have never been there before, and established veterans in the Opens. So I'm really my goal is to be in it until we can get to Florida with a statistical chance to still be in that top 9.
And the last thing I've got for you, Matt, you talked about all those different variables and strategies and mindsets. Another huge thing in the Opens that the elites is fine, it's whatever. They do the same kind of protocol, but the boat number, your boat selection in the tournament, if you're going on a sight fishing event and you have a 10-pounder on bed and your boat 2, awesome. When your boat 97 and it's a shad spawn, or your boat 167, it's a shad spawn, that dramatically affects which you don't know your boat number till practice is done, what you just accomplished in practice. You might only have a shad spawn, and now day 1, you probably won't get on one. So how is that factored for you?
I mean, going forward, the boat draw is not going to be important, nearly as important. I had the fantastic distinction of being like below boat 190 in the 3 tournaments where it did matter on the first day. And I don't care what you say. Like when we saw Brett Cannon make a 20-pound comeback on day 2 at Wheeler, we've seen guys make massive jumps on day 2, but by far the easiest way to have a good finish in the Open is to start hot out of the gates, and then you can make safe decisions to get in that top 40 on the second day and secure. I mean, there's nothing better than being out on the water at 10 a.m. on the second day, knowing you've got a top 50 finish locked up. And it just puts you behind the 8 ball, whether you're dealing with spawn and bass, whether you're dealing with a spot specific spot, or whether you're dealing with the shad spawn. And 3 of the first 4, like 2 of those 3 factors were all critically important, either spot or shad spawn related. And then you get behind the 8 ball as a 200 plus boat draw. But I mean, the next day you have the early boat draw too. So there's really no excuse there. Then it becomes the mental game of pushing, trying to make up, knowing that you're playing from behind. But I mean, boat draw's boat draw. I was also boat like 180 or what. No, I was boat 2 something at Bugs Island. And I had a top 30 finish there. So I mean, it doesn't matter. It's an excuse.
Still got to catch them.
Not to catch them, but
it just makes it easier to navigate.
Easier in your game plan, especially when you do a Wheeler, when you do a shad spawn on Bugs, and when you do a shad spawn in a spot specific tournament on Toledo.
Matt, the last thing I have for you, I'm sure you get this a lot. A lot of people, I'm sure, on the road ask you this, but naturally, you're a busy guy. I mean, you got a lot going on, and to fish the Opens on top of everything you do with Bass Talk Live, just the stuff that we see, like every morning I'm sitting in my cube listening. I mean, just that alone's a lot, but like handling the business side of it, what is that like, balancing that with the Opens itself? Because you've obviously had a good bit of success already. And I think for some, that's so surprising just because you have so much on your plate. Like, how can you focus on fishing when you have so many other things going on as well?
I mean, I look at it as multiple streams, right? So you look at any of the top, like I'm not a top guy, but if you look to model what they do, they all have their either baits, or they have shows, or they have product lines. They have a bunch of different stuff going. There's a lot of guys at the top that are silent partners and owners and stuff that you don't realize. And it's obviously very difficult to make a living fishing. I lose money every single year on the Opens. I have a great sponsor platform. The Best on Tour .net newsletter has been a big reason why I've been able to fish the Bassmaster Opens the last 3 years. But still, I mean, I lose money in the Opens even when I cash checks. But I look at it as an overall package that benefits BTL, that benefits the sponsors, that benefits all the other stuff I do. And I mean, I've been doing that podcast for 13, 14 years now. Took it over last year. So it's kind of second nature by now, just as far as talking, working, understanding what I have to get things done. And I look at a tournament week as just another work week, just doing something different. Like I leave the end of June and I'm gone through August 4th with just back to back to back to back to back. I've got boats and I'm leaving in New York to fly to ICAST and back. And then I have to be up in Michigan after taking a little 3-day vacation with my dad to go perch fishing with Michael Simonton the end of July. So I'm really excited about that. But I mean, dude, I just take it one day at a time, and I truly love and enjoy what I'm doing. I love and enjoy all aspects of it. I think when you're interviewing these guys at the top level, having been there, like we saw recently with boat draws, having been there with lost fish, having been there with success, gives you a different standpoint, a different angle to interview. And I mean, when it all comes down to it, you want to do something that you enjoy. You want to get up every morning with a purpose. And dude, I get up every morning. I love what I do. And I have that goal of qualifying for the Elite Series, crossing the classic stage one day. So really, even if certain aspects of it might not make the most financial sense overall, like you can't put a price on enjoying the quality of your life and doing what you love and waking up and getting to follow your passion every day. So there's the heartfelt answer to that one.
Absolutely. Woo! I am motivated to go. Let's go. Let's do this thing. I love that, Matt. That's crazy, Kyle.
You do the same thing, Ronnie. You do the same thing.
100%, 100%.
So
but
do you, Kyle.
I get paid millions. I get paid millions according to people because I'm on TV. Duh, don't you know that? I mean, come on. You see how
you're branching out and doing saltwater and
know,
all sorts of stuff. Next, you'll be doing the Amazing Race.
Yeah, I might do PGA/live tournaments. Who knows? That's a big topic.
I'm diving into that. I'm diving into that today.
My Twitter is blowing up right now with something I said. So it's fantastic. But Kyle, I'm more intrigued that Matt Pangrac's been doing BTL, a part of it, for 14 years. That means he was like 12 when he started, because he's still only in his mid-20s, at least looks it. So Matt, we appreciate you, man. Good luck at Eufaula. Appreciate your I guess playing ball and supporting bass, but also covering the sport as you do in general. I never want to underscore how much we appreciate the anglers and competing. That's been said that we didn't appreciate anglers at one point, but it's just a way of the business. Tough conversations are had, and everybody's got their preference. So I'm glad that your preference is the Opens, and you're part of the sport in the way you are. So I appreciate that.
Thanks. I enjoy it. Like I said, all these organizations are for-profit organizations. They have to be viable. You want every organization to thrive. That way they could bring it back to the anglers, and the anglers can thrive. You have a choice to go whatever restaurant you want to go to, and you have a choice not to go back to that restaurant. You have a choice to go back to that restaurant every day if you want to. So there's a lot of good platforms out there right now. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening in the sport of professional bass fishing, and then down through the ranks too. We're seeing a lot of younger guys. We're seeing a lot of fresh faces that are making a name for themselves, that are going to be around when we're in our 50s and 60s.
Yeah, which is, I turn 30 next month. Kyle, it's not too far away. You're the young guy now. Matt, appreciate you, man. Good luck. Be safe. And we will hopefully cover you on Bassmaster Live at some point this season of the Opens.
Heck yeah, Kyle, Ronnie, thanks for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt Pangrac, ladies and gentlemen, one of the stellar Opens pros that is very insightful from his background. You know, some of these Opens guys are insightful because they know how to catch them better than the rest. Some of these guys are insightful because they own tackle businesses. He has watched the sport from an objective standpoint for years, and now he's the one that we get to critique on finishing in the top 40 a couple times, or finishing in the bottom, 100 a couple times. And so that's a fresh perspective.
Yeah, and one thing I've always admired about Matt is the fact that you can tell everything he says, everything he does fishing, it's so calculated. You can listen to him talk, obviously talking about making decisions and boat draws and things like that, or like when you're watching Bass Talk Live and watching him interview somebody, like everything's well calculated. Like it's you can tell he's such an intelligent guy. Obviously that's part of probably what makes him a good angler, and has had some success obviously on the Opens. And I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the EQs were set up last year, he would have either qualified or would have been like right there close at the last event, I know. So I mean, obviously the further we go on to this, he's going to have a real chance to qualify for the Elite Series, and you can tell it's something he's passionate about. And like I said, a lot of things to look up to about Matt Pangrac and what he does for the sport of bass fishing.
Yeah, Pangrac finished 18th last year in the overall Opens points race, just coming up a couple places short. And you start to see this. You see, looking back at the 2022 Opens AOY, you look at John Garrett, 11th place, just barely missing out. Then you got JT Tompkins, 13th, just missing out. Matt Pangrac, 18th. There's so many good anglers. I missed a couple in there, obviously, but just for the purpose of this, you now look this year, John Garrett leading points, JT Tompkins, 5th in the points race. Some of these guys that are close, you're like, this guy's young. Where is he coming from? Who is he? These guys have been low key just below the cut, competing and attempting this dream and this journey for years. But now that they're at the top, they like, people want to be like, oh, these young guys ruining. They've been grinding with the best of them back there. You know, it's like Alex Wetherell. What is he? 28, 29, maybe 30. And he's been doing the Opens for 6+ years as well. And now he's on the elites. There's some journeyman guys that are still very young because they've started from such a young age. So Matt, I'm glad to see that he's jumped in, and I'm really, really looking forward to the Eufaula Open. I love, you know me, if I had to go to Ouachita or Dardanelle, I'm going to Dardanelle. I feel like that's and I love when it's 90-degree water or 90 degrees outside. Give me the hot ones. Give me the Sabine Rivers. Give me the grinders, because I feel like that's more in my wheelhouse. So when I cover these events, I love seeing 100 pounds. But man, I love seeing these ounce by ounce culls. Hey, I got to evaluate. Do I need to leave here and look for a 2.5 pound bite? And when you get it, it's such an attainable fish size, 2.5 pounder, 3 pounder. We catch those every day, but at some of these venues, they mean so much more. And so whether Eufaula is phenomenal like Pangrac thinks it will be, or if it is maybe in a tough week, maybe something is tough about it, I'm excited for the fall journey, for all this, for the Opens, because we'll really see a test of it. Some of these tough ones have been fun on Bassmaster Live, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm right there with you as far as the tough events. I certainly enjoy those. I'm the same way also as the fisherman. I've always liked those. The grinder style tournaments, the ones that, once again, it goes back to what I said earlier. You earn every win. You earn every good finish you get. There's no easy way out. I mean, it's just the way bass fishing is. But, you know, when it's a mentally grinding, like, you know, tough tournament, I think that those really separate some of the guys that, you know, have that mental strength and you know, obviously I think that this tournament will be no different. And it's exciting to hear from Matt that there's going to be so many different things going on, because, you know, you get to June and sometimes you just almost automatically assume, you know, it's going to be all offshore. It's all going to be one way. It's all going to be one specific thing. But having a little bit of diversity, a lot of different routes to go, hopefully will, you know, create an interesting, compelling tournament for the Bassmaster Opens.
You just don't agree with me on the Dardanelle Ouachita thing, right? You were literally agreeing with me everything, but you would choose Ouachita over Dardanelle, wouldn't you?
I like both of them just fine. I have really no preference. If it was that time of year, I'm going to be fishing a river system somewhere. Even if it's on Lake Ouachita, I'm going to go fish somewhere shallow up a river or up a long creek or something. So I would agree with you, but for the sake of a short drive, I'd probably go to Lake Ouachita.
Exactly. I will say that I remember the 10 Killer Elite event. I think that was mid to late August. Obviously a different time of year, but the same state of Oklahoma. We had guys catching them in 5 feet of water or less, and we had the winner obviously fishing deep trees, you know, on a big jig. So a lot could be in play at Eufaula. Super excited. Thank you to Matt Pangrac for being our guest today for this preview of the 5th stop of the St. Croix Bassmaster Open season. The EQ race is off and running, 4 events in, and we've got a great top 10. Kyle, I will see you in the next episode. We're going to have the winning ways for the Elite Series, for the Bassmaster Kayak Series as well coming up. A lot of winners segments of the best to get it done this year. And when we do that, we will see you in the next one on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company.